Okay, it's time to get into my statistical wrap up for 2020. So, just talking about the books I read and kind of break it down. I think this is really fun to watch and put together, and I just kind of like seeing it. For the first part, we're going to go through my Storygraph information because I did put everything over in Storygraph and personally loving it for tracking my books. I don't get everything I want from their statistics, so I still have my own spreadsheet for some things. But honestly, the graphs are so nice. I'm so happy that it's there. But let's get into it. The first thing is, how many books did I read? I read 122 books. It's shocking to me, honestly, guys. I read 67 books last year. I have never read so many books. And it was still like so many pages. Like, it wasn't like I just suddenly read a bunch of like tiny things, which I did, which I have no regrets. I loved a lot of the novellas I read, but I read over 50,000 pages. That's so many pages. Like, goodness, I don't think I'll ever beat that again. And that's okay. It's just, this is astounding. The best reading year I've ever had. And something that's really cool about Storygraph, because Storygraph is amazing, is it kind of breaks things down into the type of mood you like. So when people review books, there's like this whole section where you can click on what moods you think are in a book. So you can put multiple moves like adventurous, mysterious, etc. And so the pie chart will have a lot of overlap. Like, a lot of my adventurous books might also have been mysterious. But I think based off this pie chart that you're all seeing, my top 6 moods were adventurous, mysterious, challenging, emotional, reflective, and dark. Which, challenging, yes, I do love a good challenging read. I do love good mystery and intrigue. I think reflective was something I also noticed this year. It's like, man, I'm having a lot of introspective stories that I'm really connecting to. So that's something I'm really excited to see how that changes and ebbs and flows throughout the years as I change as a reader into what my mood wants. And I feel like adventurous will always be at the top because most people consider a lot of fantasy and sci-fi stories adventurous. That's what I've noticed by being on Storygraph. Another thing that I actually delve into a bit more is, I'll show here, this is my pacing breakdown. So I read about a third of each type of pacing of slow, medium, and fast. But what I wanted to know and what I dug into is, well, which one do I actually like more though? Like, which one has my highest average rating? And so I went through, and so I read 40 slow-paced books, and it got an average rating of 3.87. And I read 46 medium-paced books, so that's my largest category technically, and that was 4.11. So hedges out the slow one. And fast-paced, I almost thought that this would be my higher ranked one, because a lot of the times if I read a book really fast and I rate it right away, I'm like, oh, that was really great. I went through that so quickly. But this one actually only had an average rating of like a solid 4. So it turns out I think medium-paced makes sense that it has the higher one, because I do like enough build-up to make me care about things. If things are too fast, sometimes I don't feel like they leave an impression. And I just feel like I'm harsher when I'm rating slow-paced books, because I feel like they have to earn the pacing for me. It's like, okay, if you're going to be slow, I still need to be engaged. And yes, some of that's on me to stay engaged, but some of that's on you as an author to convince me to be engaged with your work. You know what I mean? So I thought that was interesting. And the next thing we'll break down our page number. Over half of what I read is between 300 and 500 pages. This is not surprising to me. I feel like this is the average length of most books. But I do think I do read a lot more tomes than the average person. Like 25% of what I read is like a tome, 500 plus pages. So that was unsurprising. And I think a larger pie than normal for me this year is that less than 300 pages was also a quarter, because I read a lot more novellas, some novels that were like 250 pages and things like that. So that's all standard. It was just interesting to see, but nothing super surprising to me. The next thing I like on Storygraph, and I'll just show you guys here, is they do like this bar graph for the genres. So unsurprisingly, my highest categories are fantasy and sci-fi, especially since also, like the mood, there's going to be some overlap. Sometimes people will mark certain books as both genres, and actually this isn't something you vote on when you're like reviewing. This is something where they take from the publisher information what genre it should be in. And I mean, honestly, apparently I've read 24 young adult books, which I think is a pretty good like amount of everything I read this year. It's like a sixth of what I've read. And then I'm really happy that I read over 10 short story collections. Like, that is something that I started midway through the year. I'm like, I want to read more short story collections. I miss short stories, and I've really liked adding that into my like reading diet again. It's been amazing. And then contemporary, LGBTQ, historical, dystopian, they all have a pretty good showing, and everything just like peters off from there. I really like that I don't have to think about what genre anything is with Storygraph, that it just like tells it for me. But my favorite graph that I think Storygraph gives me is how it shows your pages read per month and books read per month. So it has this sinusoidal wave graph for that. And I really, I have this theory that on certain times when I have that with the books read, it's like, well, I'm just finishing all those books in the next month. They just didn't get finished. So that's why I'll sometimes get these like peaks and valleys. And you can kind of tell exactly when the pandemic started for me. I was definitely someone who basically read away all of my sorrows when the pandemic started in March and April, because I feel like I was pretty steady in January, February, March, and then it just shoots up. And then come August, when things were starting to return to a certain normalcy for me, it started to go back down again. But I'm still above what I feel like I used to read before BookTube. So it'll be interesting to see. I did learn from like looking at this and thinking of my own reading pace that when I plan TBRs, I have this goal of I want to read about 100 pages a day. So try to only plan 3,000 pages per TBR if I can, but I make a little stretch goal of like, well, maybe you could read 4,000 if some of the books really grab you. So that's what like this graph helped me figure out for myself. And I like it. I think it's really cool. You can tell some months when I read a lot of books, but I didn't have that many pages, that was a month I read more novellas and things like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Next thing we can talk about are my star ratings. So I switched to only whole stars partway through the year. I have how I rate my books, and I might change it, but currently that video is in the cards and it's how I currently am rating books. Storygraph lets you use up to quarter stars, and although I don't think I could ever use quarter stars, I don't have that within me to figure out where it falls on that scale. I might start using half stars again because Storygraph lets me use half stars, and I do feel like 3.5s and 4.5s are real. And although I don't mind having to think extra about rounding down or up after finishing, it would be nice to just have that again. And one of the reasons I stopped using it was because Goodreads I couldn't. So that was part of it, but I don't think it would change my average that month. It might make it a 3.8 instead of a 4, but honestly, I'm reading on average 4-star reads, which are usually really good to great reads. Like that's normally what those are for me. So that makes me happy that I'm on average picking up things that I'm really enjoying. And yeah, that's all I really care about. The next thing we'll talk about are the published years. So in general, most of the things I read came out in the last 5 years, and I'm not surprised. Even before BookTube, I was reading a lot of modern fantasy. I was even leaning towards modern sci-fi at that point. And then getting on BookTube, all you want to do are read all the books that all your friends have read and are talking about. So it's kind of what happened to me. I have zero regrets. It's been great. I guess I still want to make sure I'm still always reading backlist books, but it's just, it'll be interesting to see how this trend continues as I keep being on BookTube and as I keep wanting to review books that are coming out in the years that I'm reading them. Because like this year, I'm planning to read at least 12 books that come out in 2021 because I would like to review an arc a month. So that's just kind of part of it. And then of course, series are always continuing. So I'll want the new release for a series I care about. So I'm not concerned about this, but it's going to be interesting to see how that trend shifts around. And the next thing we'll talk about are how many of the books that I read am I getting from the library, or am I buying new or getting used? And unsurprisingly, 73% of what I read, I get from the library. I pretty much know this. I do not buy that many books. I don't have a stat for that. I'm just pretty aware that I do not purchase that many books. I don't film that many hauls. I will have a haul soon because over the past 6 months, I have acquired enough books to talk to you guys about, but I only have these 2 shelves and I'm trying to keep to these 2 shelves, and it's a struggle. It's a big struggle, so that's part of it. Plus, it helps me save money. Like, I could not afford to read 100 2020 books that I purchased new, and I'm lucky enough to live in Boston, so I have access to a lot of great library systems, and so I take advantage of it, and it's pretty great. The last things we'll talk about are my author breakdowns, because I always try to keep an eye on the gender and how many authors of color I'm reading, just to make sure that I am keeping up with my intentions and grabbing for things, because I like to keep it kind of close to 50-50 male-female for authors, and I want to try and read between 40 and 50% authors of color. So over the year, I read 54% female, 43% male, and 3% non-binary. So that's pretty good for me. I don't have any issues with that number. I yeah, I think that's pretty close to what I want to have. I guess I do read more female authors than male, but honestly, I just think it's harder for me to actually put females on my TBR because, especially right now, I'm in the middle of 3 huge fantasy series and they're all by white men. So I don't really want to change my intention there. So if I keep accidentally reading by more women, that's okay with me. And then authors of color, I'm really excited because if you were here way back at the start of my channel, after my first quarter, when I first did a stats video, I was like, I cannot believe how few authors of color I just read. And honestly, it was mostly one author that I read many of her works. Yes, it was Jemison. But now, at the end of the year, I made it to 39% authors of color. And yes, next year I want that to be a higher percentage, but I'm really happy with it. A lot of my favorite works of the year came out by authors of color, so yeah, I'm just on track. That's what these stats have shown me. I'm on track, had a really fun reading year, and yeah, let me know what things you like to track in your statistics or what you find interesting when you watch other people's statistics videos. I like to see what people focus in on and what interests them and how things affect their reading and things like that. I don't know, I like numbers. I think they're kind of cool. I am kind of a nerd. So other than that, leave a chart in the description below if you want to just leave an emoji to let me know you're here, and like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.